Hey everybody, Rob here. It's time for a few new pro revenge stories. First one, wasted a scammer's afternoon and gas money using a fake Facebook account for insulting me weeks earlier. Let's jump right in. Make sure to join our Discord for some giveaways, and if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button for more daily Reddit stories. Back in September, I went to look at a pair of moose antlers on Facebook Marketplace that my dad was interested in. He lives in a small cabin on my property and thought the antlers would look cool over his front door. We get there and the dude is clearly high, jittery, keeps wiping his nose, etc. We met him at a storage rental place, so he had to let us in with his code, and we were stuck in the facility until he let us back out. We get to his rental unit and he gets the antlers out. They were very clearly fake. He said he'd spray painted them brown to make them look like they were still in velvet. It was obvious he'd sprayed them to try and make them look real. The weight was off, the color was off. There were several large cracks in them and you could see they were white inside, not bone colored. There were also several points broken off and the material inside was white and powdery. Again, not bone. He kept insisting they could be fixed with some epoxy. Finally, tapping your fingers on them made a drum noise, so they were hollow inside. At this point, I hadn't said a word at all. I was just along for the ride with my dad. Dad politely tells the guy that we're going to pass. He thinks they are fake. Thanks, but no thanks. This guy goes off the deep end, screaming at us, calling us all sorts of names, insulting us, our mothers, etc. Then he starts screaming at us that we were locked in there with him and weren't leaving until he was ready to go. Dad and I get in the truck and luckily another customer was coming into their unit and we were able to get out of the lock gate when they came in. We both thought it was hilarious how off the wall this guy acted and how fake the antlers looked in person. I stew on this for a few weeks and finally come up with a revenge plan. I didn't say a single word to the guy and he insulted my entire family tree, wife, intelligence, etc. I create a new Facebook account with the dumbest old person name I could come up with. Then I use a bunch of Hide the Pain Herald photos to populate it with. Then start adding as many friends as I can, posting dumb crap about old black and white movies, my prostate, etc. Spent a few days crap loading this account as much as I could. Then, once the account was 2 weeks old and I could get on Facebook groups, I go to a few of the groups I knew this guy was on and find some of his items he had for sale. Luckily, he had 2 large bookcases for sale. Great, something big and awkward to move around. Next, I do some research and find the most pain in the butt location in my city to get to. I pick a place that has no highway on-ramps, so it takes at least half an hour to get to it off the highway. I message him and I ask if he would deliver since I only have a sedan, and he says yes, for $50 to cover his gas and a helper because they would take 2 people to move around. We set up a date and time, and I tell him I'm going to meet him at a nearby grocery store since my house is hard to find. Finally, the time arrives. He messages me that he is at the grocery store. Now I come up with every annoying old person slow thing I can think of. I'm putting my shoes on. My wife is in the shower and I can't leave in case she slips. Then, oh, we've not gone anywhere in so long because of this China virus. My car battery is dead. Mr. Scammer finally asks for my address and says he will find the place. I get on Google Maps and find the most pain in the butt street to get to, knowing he's driving a full-size van and towing a trailer with the bookshelves. So I find a street in the very center of an old, badly laid out neighborhood, got on Street View and look for where the house numbers stop and pick a number a few above that one. I tested in Google Maps and Google Maps isn't smart enough to know that house number doesn't exist. It just points you at the end of a dead-end street. So I relay this address. Of course, I make sure to mess it up a few times and get him lost in the process. After about 90 minutes, he messages that he can't find that house number, but he's on my street. Can I please come outside? I reply back with, no thanks. No thanks what? I walked out there and saw them, not interested in buying them. My Facebook account blows up for the next hour with him trying to call me, video chat, sending all kinds of horrible messages about how I'm a liar and a cheater. I never respond back. I check it occasionally, and about every 2 weeks, he sends me a nasty message still. Dude had no idea who it was that messed with him or why it happened. I'm kind of debating about doing it again. OP, there was a missed opportunity there. When he wouldn't let you leave the storage area, he committed the crime of unlawful detainment. Although you probably still could have a police officer go over to his place and explain why he just can't do that. On to our next story. Insult my friend and he gets you and your bosses fired. Let's jump right in. I heard this story 12 or so years ago from a classmate in college. The story happened in the late 90s. He worked at a corner store with a sandwich shop in it. It was a corporate-owned chain and not a franchise type deal. He worked in the deli on third shift. The store would close from 12 p.m. till 4 a.m. and there would be only 2 people there from 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. He was only there for about 6 weeks but had worked in food service for years. He knew all the rules, regulations, and laws relating to food prep and storage. When he started, he noticed that they didn't follow them all that well and were not receptive to any mention of changing that. Things came to a head after he went to his shift manager about how the food was way too old to be safe to eat. His manager, fed up with him at that point, told him to f**k off and that if he didn't like how they did things, he should quit. And he said it sprinkled with personal insults. He decided to finish out the shift as normal and return the next day with a small disposable camera and document everything. He then quit at the end of that shift and went home and got the pictures developed. He then made 2 phone calls while they were being developed. First, he called the state regulatory agency that was in charge of food safety in restaurants, and the second was to the corporation's HR hotline. He knew that if he just called the company, they might write him off as a disgruntled employee and not do anything. But knowing that photographic evidence was being sent to the state would get a response. And boy, did it get a response. The state took 3 weeks to get around to checking the place out, but within 3 hours of calling the company, the area manager showed up, and within 5, an inspector from corporate showed up. It resulted in the store temporarily closing, all the management staff being fired, and some of the longer-term employees being fired as well. This was a nice short and sweet story. However, in the comments there's a bunch of people saying that it's not revenge, it's just acting responsibly. I can understand this part. Acting responsibly is what we all want to do, but I can also see how people would fear reprisal and not want to do this. I would love to hear your take on it though. Let's see it in the comments down below. On to our last story, sleeping my way to a raise. Let's jump right in. I was 22 and I was working 3 jobs living in Chicago, one of which was a bouncer in a bar that was open until 4 a.m. I did data entry during the day. Money was tight, ramen noodles, sleeping on a couch, drinking the cheapest beer there was, living just at the edge. I was typing away one day. I was pretty good at data entry using scripts and stuff, and I fell asleep. Just for a moment. First time ever. Didn't even head bob. Just head slightly tilted, eyes closed. My asshat supervisor caught me, made a big production about my violation, and that it would go to the director for the official warning. A day later, I am summoned before the director. I openly admit I fell asleep, and she asked why, and I told her it was because I worked until 4 a.m., in bed at 5 a.m., and at work by 9 a.m. She asked, "Why are you working at that bar?" I told her that the data entry job wasn't enough to make ends meet. She asked my hourly rate, and when I told her, she made a face and said, "Oh no, that's terrible," and then gave me a $3 an hour raise. I came out and asshat supervisor had a smug look on his face. I told him what happened. Asshat was speechless. He marched right back into the director's office and closed the door. He came out later and wouldn't look at me. Went straight to his desk and we didn't speak again for a couple of days. I was told secondhand that his failure to give me the raise she had authorized months before nearly cost him his job, but she was giving him a second chance. I did mention he was an asshat, right? For clarification, he didn't pocket my raise or anything, just didn't feel I deserved it. Asshat. I was able to cut back my hours to just Saturday night at the bar. No more sleeping on the job. One last note, asshat rode home on the same train every day, the 5:15 train. Like clockwork, he'd head to the bathroom at 4:55. We had a single whole men's room for the trip home. After this, I set an alarm and would go into the bathroom 2 to 3 times a week, a minute before him, and force him to leave without relieving himself. Petty, I know, but he was a major asshat. So, did anybody else think this story was going in a completely different direction because of the title? I have to admit I was a little disappointed, even though it was a pretty darn good story. I love the added on petty revenge at the end, and I know if they had a very long commute, it could be very uncomfortable if they weren't able to make it in and have some relief beforehand. Way to go, OP. I'd like to thank all 3 OPs for posting their stories to the Pro Revenge subreddit. You can visit them at the links in the description below. Please go there and give them an upvote. Once again, this is Rob from Karma Comment Chameleon saying thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and share it with your friends, and we'll see you in the next one.